This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Know-How is brought to you by CacheFly.
Today on Know-How,
Networking 101, Part 3, Ports.
welcome to Know-How. It's a Twitch show where we build, bend, break, and upgrade. I am Father Robert Ballecer.
And I'm Brian Burdett.
And for the next however many minutes it takes, we're going to be dropping the network knowledge on you like it was next Tuesday. Now, Brian.
Right, next Tuesday.
It's a thing. You don't understand it.
Because the cleaning lady comes on Monday. Okay. Just go with it.
Exactly. now, we've been doing a series on Mondays, Networking 101. We did the first episode on routing. We explained in a very broad way how routing works, how traffic actually passes across the internet into our networks.
Right.
Last week, we talked a little bit about routers
and how to set up the Wi-Fi and how to, like, what firewalls were and how to do static IPs to your different devices. And
today we need to do something that's a little bit more advanced but incredibly, incredibly important.
Yeah, you've already warned me. When you came in today, you're like, we're going deep.
We're going
deep dive networking.
Well, as deep as you can expect from a Networking 101.
Right.
And that's ports. We're going to be talking about ports. Now, ports are important because you, at some point, are going to want things on the inside of your network to talk properly with things on the outside of your network. Now, in most cases, that's not a problem because the device on the inside of your network can reach out and initiate a conversation. But sometimes, just sometimes, you need a way for something on the outside to reach in. That's when you have to understand ports and port forwarding.
Right. You just open all the ports, and that way everything can talk to the internet.
Wow. You know, the scary. Here's the funny thing. I understand what you're saying. I know that's a joke, but
I'm being sarcastic.
In the old day, that's what it used to be. Remember, we talked about NAT and what it was like when everything had a real address on the internet.
Right.
We didn't know about things like security. We just knew you plug this in and suddenly I had access to my Netscape browser. Yes, that was a thing back then.
Netscape
browser. Don't even go there.
Did you search on Alta Vista too?
Gopher.
Gopher.
You don't even know Gopher, do you?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I'm trying to make a joke about Alta Vista, and I don't even know what Gopher is.
Well, you know, back in the day, anything that was running on your computer that was a network service had to open a port. And a port is it's a construct. It's not a physical thing. It's not like a network port you plug something into. It's just a way to set up in the TCP/IP layer a little thing that listens. And it listens for a request. That's a port.
Yeah.
Right?
Where like a ship of data will come and dock. Is that not a good metaphor?
Okay, no, that works. Okay,
Maybe.
yeah, you keep the port open so the ship can dock and unload its data.
Cargo,
Yeah, all right.
I don't know.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
That's why I thought they were called ports. So every time I come back to networking, it's little light cycles, you know, it's basically Tron. Tron in my mind. There's little motorcycles that
and
pass.
pirates, evidently.
Well, yeah, of course. There's going to be giant pirate ships that come and drop off cargo at different ports.
And there you have it, folks. Today we're talking about data pirates.
That's right.
All right, so when I'm talking about these ports, what I'm talking about is it's a 16 bits worth of unsigned values. And that means there's 65,536, so 2 to the power of 16.
Okay.
65,536. We don't use port 0, so there's actually 16,535 available ports for me to address.
I'm going to have to take your word for that.
Okay, it's math. You can do the math later on.
We're going to have to check this math
We'll have to check the math. But it's not as if there are just those 65,536. There's actually two main ways for devices to talk across the internet. There's TCP, Transmission Control Protocol, and UDP, which is a Uniform Datagram Protocol.
Okay.
Yeah, so the reason why that's important is because there are different ways of communicating that have very specific strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, good. I need to know the difference because when I set up port forwarding for my Xbox, there were ones that they said to do TCP and ones they said to do UDP, but I'm not sure why.
And most of the time, they actually just say set both UDP and TCP.
Because is it UDP back and forth and TCP is one direction or something like that?
Kind of. Yeah. Actually, yes. That's a very good way to think of it. So when I'm thinking of TCP, I'm thinking of a two-way conversation where there's a handshake where two clients or two computers, two nodes, decide they're going to talk to one another. Okay, it's like, hey, and
Nice
yeah,
to see
exactly, and it stays as long as that connection stays open. We're shaking hands, and I'm saying, hey, I'm going to give you this piece of data, and you're going to say, I've received the piece of data. Then I said, I'm going to send you the next piece of data, and you say, I didn't get that, and say, okay, I'm going to send it back to you. Right. So
and
that's
then I get my hand back.
that you get. So it's a very good way of making sure that the communication is actually taking place. But there is a weakness, and the weakness is that you have to establish that connection. You have to handshake, and you have to maintain that connection. Otherwise, you have to reestablish the connection.
Okay.
It's very good. Normally, that's what we want because we don't want to lose any data.
Right.
UDP is different. UDP, it just sends. And it can send the packets out of order. It can send them in any order. It basically looks for the fastest possible way to get from one port to another, one node to another.
Okay.
Now, this is good if you don't worry about losing a couple of packets here and there. Like, for example, if you're streaming video, multicast video to a lot of different clients, you don't want to have a handshake to every single one of those clients. Let's say you're serving out 1 million of them.
Is that what adds to like latency then? Or
Yeah, absolutely. And that would just overload your server.
Okay.
But if you're using UDP, you can say, look, I'm going to send out a solid stream. And what you get, you get. And if you don't get something, you just miss that particular part.
And if that data isn't received on the other end, is that when you get like video cutout or like bandwidth restrictions or something, like where the video starts looking blocky?
Yeah,
in this
you
example?
can. Yeah. So if anytime there's missing data, normally your client will try to make up what went there.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So TCP, again, Transmission Control Protocol, and UDP, actually I call it uniform. It's a user datagram protocol.
Okay.
And each of those has 65,535 possible ports. So in your router, when you're setting ports, forwarding, UDP, TCP, you can choose one or the other or both.
Okay.
But you have to choose the right ones for whatever service that you're using.
All right.
Okay, so that's an overview. Let's go a little deeper. Because I know that this can be a little confusing.
Okay.
So if this is the internet right here.
That's when you should get scared, is when you go over to the board.
Because my drawing is horrible. Oh, this big eye, that's the internet, right? Now it's connected to my router, which is right here. And so I'm going to say that this is my Synology. This is my RT2600, right?
Right there, that little box.
This little box. And then behind me, these are different devices that I have hooked up. Let's say this one's my Xbox, this one's my laptop, and this one's a network camera.
Sure.
Okay. Because of what we talked about in the previous week with our firewall and our NAT, network address translation, this cannot speak to this without somehow going through this. That makes sense, correct?
Perfect, yeah.
So in order for something on the internet to speak with something on the inside of my network, it has to go through my router.
Right.
And my router needs to know exactly what it's allowed to pass through and what it's not. A well-designed router will give you the ability to specifically define what traffic can pass through and what cannot.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, in this particular case, though, here's the problem. In the old day, let's go back to my old day, each of these devices on the inside of my network would have what's called a routable address. It's a real-world address. If I type that address anywhere on the internet, it would get to that device.
I see. Instead of like the IP address on your LAN.
Like at 192.168 or 10.1.14.1, which is what ours is.
And we discussed that in the previous episode that we ran out of IP addresses, and it's a bad idea to have
really is
things inside your network with an internet address like that.
Yeah, my internet connected toaster probably doesn't need to be connected. Actually,
your microwave does, though.
My microwave does.
Because that's got a lot of video that's going back and forth.
Well, remember, it's not just, it doesn't have to be connected to the internet. It doesn't need to be what we call public facing. In other words, it might need to go out and talk to something because that's what internet connected stuff does. But there's absolutely no reason for a device on the outside to be able to hit the device on the inside.
Right.
That's what my NAT does. That's what my firewall does.
Okay.
However, if I want the internet to be able to speak to one of these devices on the inside of my network,
then you have to open some ports.
I do, because I only have one routable address. That's the address that my router has, right? So I can't say, well, go to 52.52.1.6, because that's actually the router.
Right.
So I need a way to get from that
to the device that
to
you
one of
want.
those devices, and that's what port forwarding is going to let me do.
Okay.
So what port forwarding will let me do, let's say I set my laptop for 8088. Let's say I set my network camera for 662.
Okay.
What I can do is I can set up my router so that if anytime it's external, it's single external routable addresses hit at port 8088, it will get routed to the laptop. If it hits port 662, it gets routed to the camera.
Okay.
So it's a way of making it accessible to the outside world without just opening up all of its ports.
Right.
Right,
Okay.
let's take a look. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. But then I'm just worried, like, okay, so if I open that port, what stops anyone else from getting access to that?
Good maintenance.
Okay.
Actually, that's a very good point. If you do open up ports, just remember that's what you've done. You've opened up a port. So anything on the internet can hit that service, can hit that port.
Right.
If the device is not properly configured, you probably shouldn't be forwarding traffic to it.
Okay.
Okay? That's like if I have a 10-year-old web server that's never been patched, I probably shouldn't put that on the public internet, no matter what port forwarding I have.
Okay. Well, so I port forwarded my Xbox, but
No,
I mean,
you DMZ'd your Xbox.
at one point I did.
Yeah.
Now that I have a new router, I haven't.
Well, actually, that's a good point. Why not just DMZ? Because I did that.
Open all the ports on
Back
that
in the
thing.
day when I was so frustrated, why can't I get Xbox Live? And suddenly there was a setting on my router that said DMZ. I'm like, yes, let's do that.
And it sounds cool too, because it's
does.
like isn't it the demilitarized zone?
Yeah,
all right.
military. I'm gonna jump out of a plane. No, but it worked. The problem is what I've just done is I've made that public address, so 52.52.1.6, whatever it might be. That public address now forwards all 65,536 ports to my Xbox. If my Xbox, for any reason, has a port that's open that should not be open,
Right.
or a service that is not properly configured, it can now be attacked by the internet.
Okay. I mean, I
don't
don't
want that.
No, that sounds bad. That sounds bad.
But let's look through some of the more common ports. Port 80, that's HTTP. So web services typically come from port 80, although we're moving away from that because now we're using HTTPS, right? We want encrypted communications. That's typically going to use port 443. FTP, which I still do. I don't know if you youngins use file transfer protocol.
I know of FTP.
Okay, that's port 21.
Okay.
So there are some givens, some ports that we kind of know belong to a certain service.
And those are like universal assigned ports.
Yeah, just well, not The thing is though, it doesn't have to be. Like HTTP doesn't have to be port 80. It's just that we all kind of agreed it's going to be port 80.
That's funny. So
FTP doesn't have to be 21. It's just that we use 21.
how does that come about? It's just
Because
everyone's
people are
like, oh, we have to organize, but not really in a legitimate way. We're just gonna.
Well, because like if I type FTP into my browser and then :/ and type an address, my browser will see that and say, oh, I should probably try to communicate with port 21.
Huh. Okay.
But I could set up an FTP server on port 60,000.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
In fact, some people do that to try to obfuscate their ports. So they'll put FTP on a port other than 21 because people know to try to scan 21.
Right.
That doesn't really work though because my scanner will scan everything.
Right. Okay. So
We'll talk about that later too.
I just had a flashback to when we were at Black Hat and we were watching. When we were learning about how they hacked into the Jeep, and one of the things they did was
port 21.
scanned all the ports, and they're like, "Why is this port on here?"
And that's it's a necessity. And they knew exactly what you're talking about. Of course, is when Valasek and Miller got into a Jeep Cherokee's onboard computer going through the internet connection,
Right.
Because they had a new feature that allowed you to make the car a hotspot.
Exactly.
And what they found was they were using standard ports that weren't protected.
Yeah.
So when they scanned 21, they knew that's probably FTP. When they scanned port 80, it was probably a web server. And so they could run those types of attacks against those ports.
Okay, cool.
Now it makes sense, right?
Yeah, it does.
Good. Okay. So what we got to do now is let's show you precisely how this works.
Okay.
Alex, if you go to my computer, so HDMI 1, I believe. No, the other one. HDMI 2. There we go. Okay, so this is the router interface. This is my Synology R2600.
Looks familiar.
It looks familiar. I like this one. It is kind of how you say sexy. Yes.
As sexy as router interfaces get.
Exactly. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go to my port forwarding tab inside of my network center. This is a super simple interface. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new rule, and I can call it anything I want. The private IP address is going to be the IP address that the device has on the inside of the network.
Right. So 192.168.1. Whatever.
Whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Or in this particular case, I believe I'm 10.1.14. That's
Okay.
the address it chose. Now the public port is the port on the real address. So that's the outside facing side of the router.
Okay.
So whatever that real address is,
Right.
it's going to say, all right, which port gets hit, do I take action?
Okay.
So in this particular case, I'm going to say, let's say it is an FTP server. So I'm going to say port 21. So port 21 on the outside, what it's going to do is it's going to go to a port on the inside. Let's say 10.1.14.31. And actually, this is cheating. This is showing me a device that's already on my network. Actually, well done, Synology. I didn't know that. So when I start doing this,
it'll bring up.
It actually brings up the devices that are connected to it. That's not bad. That's a cool.
So instead of having to try and memorize what IP addresses they were.
That's a cool little feature. Thank you, Synology.
Does it also have the MAC address on there too?
Yeah,
what is it? Or
well,
access?
yeah, that's the MAC with access appended to it. But okay, here's the important thing though. Right now I have set port 21 to port 21. So anything that hits port 21 on the public IP address is going to be forwarded to 10.1.14.31 port 21. But I don't have to have it be port 21. I could have it be port 6000. Right? So it doesn't have to be the same address. So I can say, hey,
I see.
Everything, let's use a better example. Let's say port 80. So the standard HTTP address, address port. So this is a web server.
Right.
I could run 65,534, because I need one for my router, 534 web servers inside my network.
Right.
And I would just give them a different port and on the inside.
On the inside, but they'd all have the same public port, or they could?
No. They'd have different public ports on the outside. So I'd say hit 8888 on the outside and hit 80 on the inside.
I see.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that
and
does make sense.
This is normally when we're forwarding, we can forward both TCP and UDP.
Okay.
Unless you want to get really good. If, the best case scenario here is to actually only forward the protocol that you're actually using.
Okay.
Most of us are lazy though, and we'll forward both because we don't want to figure out that suddenly it didn't do what we wanted to do.
Right. Come back to it later and it's broken or something.
Right. Now, so we're gonna do this in just a bit, but this is how this works.
This makes sense. It's basically, I don't know, road mapping. You know, you're giving the internet directions of where you want things to go.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, and by the way, if you do use an Xbox, I think this gets updated every once in a while, but the ports that you need to forward are 88, which is UDP, 3074, which is UDP and TCP, 53 UDP and TCP, 80 TCP, 500, 3544, and 4500 UDP.
Okay.
So
yeah, that sounds about right.
Those are the ones that, instead of doing DMZ, you can select those, forward this to the Xbox, and now everything works properly.
Right. The important part too, though, with port forwarding is to make sure that the IP address that you're using for like the Xbox doesn't change. Because the problem I did have a while back is I would port forward, but then something else would steal that IP like down the road later, and I'm like, why is my NAT closed again?
Which would be a perfect chance for you to play with statics. You could give your Xbox an address on the inside of your network that never changes.
Which I have done since then, yeah.
Which is outside of the DHCP range, so no device that connects to your network will ever try to take that address, and you know that your Xbox always has that address.
Yep.
One thing though, if you're gonna start playing like this, what you want to do is you want to make sure you document everything. Know that you set something up for a particular address and a particular port. In fact, a notebook is great. What's even better is take a couple of, get a labeler and just stick the label on the device. Because I guarantee you, it's very nerdy, but you're going to put that camera away and you're going to bring it out in a year.
Yeah.
And you're going to plug it in and you're going to, I can't remember what my username, my password, or the address was. And you have to reset the entire thing.
Right.
Just don't, just take 5 seconds and it's much better.
Yeah, it seems like you've learned from that prior experience.
It's personal experience.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Wasn't too happy with that. Yeah. Okay. When we come back, we're actually going to start to play around with ports on real devices. We've been showing you a little bit of why ports work the way they do and why they're important for you to understand. But let's actually look at a couple of devices that we can change the ports on and that we can start playing with port forwarding so that we can, do this the right way.
Well, an important thing, too, is when I had a crummy router, it was really difficult to navigate the interface and get it to work right. And having a nice router to do all this makes it so much easier. Yeah.
It does. We're going to get to that easier in just a minute. But first, these messages.
Previously on Twit.
Mary Jo and I decided that we could really bring the show up a notch if she had a gong behind her.
Yeah,
like that.
tech news today.
The founder of the private browser DuckDuckGo is here to tell us how to avoid being tracked while browsing.
DuckDuckGo is actually profitable. We've been profitable for several years. What people don't realize is even on Google, they make most of their money off the search engine itself, just based on the keyword you type in. And so it's really a myth that anyone needs to track you to make money in web search.
This Week in Google.
Is Google supposed to be a fact engine? Or is it supposed to be a
Yes. It would behoove Google and everybody to understand that we all need better critical thinking skills.
Google should be the card catalog for the internet, not some librarian saying, well, that's not true. Well, that is true.
But people don't think of Google that way.
Twit. It's where your brain and tech meet.
Guys can just check this box and they can defer updates for up to 4 weeks. Yeah.
I'm sorry, that slipped. That was a gong slip.
It sounded like a bomb.
That was a gong slip.
Okay, so let's go ahead and actually take a look at a device that needs its ports forwarded. What I have here is a network camera.
Oh, hey, there's a little label on there.
Look at that. See, someone takes it, but that's not actually the address. I just didn't change the label.
Oh, all right.
I'm a bad person. Okay, so
at least you remember that.
Precisely. This is an Access network camera. You could substitute this for any device. Any device is going to have something of the similar configuration, and all the network stack works the same. This particular one is connected into my Synology router. Now, there's a couple of things that you might want to do that might help you in the future when you're looking at these kinds of devices. Hold on, let me get out of this. Yes. The first thing is, if you go back to here, there we go. If I go to my local network and I jump into my DHCP clients, it actually shows me all of the devices that have asked and received a DHCP address. So this particular case, I know my Access camera, because it's got the name Access on it, it's got the address of 10.1.14.31. That's important. That's the internal address. That's the address it has while it's on the inside of my network. So if I go there, this is my network camera. Yay!
So you just plug that IP address into
my browser. So yeah, this is a browser. This camera actually has a web server.
I see. Because you're on your local network. You couldn't just type this in when you go to work or on a different network and it wouldn't connect. You'd have to.
Yeah. No. That address only works when I'm inside the network. If I'm outside, 10.1.14.31, that's non-routable.
Right.
If I type that into a browser and I'm not actually on the 10.1.14,
you won't be able to get to it.
I'll get nothing.
Yeah.
Right. But that doesn't have to be. All right. So let's go into the setup. If you go back to the setup for my camera here. Yes, I know, it's not private.
Thanks. And then your password is admin.
Monkey 1, 2, 3. Okay, so actually let me do this. Ooh, ooh.
Whoa,
we're zooming. All right, so if I go to TCP/IP, this has all the settings I need. First of all, it's getting a DHCP address. But if I was going to do this for real, I would never put my cameras on DHCP. I would always give them a static because I want to know where they are. I don't want anything stepping on their address because I don't want to have that one incident and to find out, oh yeah, the camera, it got stepped on by my Xbox. So,
and so you couldn't get the video. Yeah, I see.
Yeah. But the other important part here is if I go into Advanced TCP/IP, you'll see right down here, I have entries for HTTP and HTTPS. The camera is basically telling me what are the ports it needs to function.
Okay.
It needs 80 because that's the web server, and it needs 443 because that's SSL, that's secure. Right? So those are the two ports I'm going to want to forward
on your router.
On my router.
Ah.
But okay, here's the trick though. I'm not going to forward 80, I'm not going to forward 443 because those are really common ports. I don't want that always to go to my webcam. In other words, if someone scans and finds my router, I don't want them thinking, oh, port 80 is open, and suddenly they get to the webcam interface. That would be bad.
Okay, so you're going to just change it to a different port?
On the interface. But so I have it right now. I know that my camera is at 10.1.14.31, and I know that it needs port 80 and port 443.
443, right.
Okay, so let's go back to my Synology. And in my Synology, I'm now going to go ahead and do port forwarding. I'm going to create, and we're going to go 10. And then it fills in for me. 10.1.14.31. And the public port I'm going to say is, how about 999? And the private port is going to be 80.
I see.
So if I go to my external address, port 999, it's going to forward to the web server.
Which is 80.
Which is 80. So I'm going to
And
create
that's
that.
what it needs to be able to connect.
Yeah. But I need one more because remember I needed 80 and
for
443.
HTTP.
Precisely. Very, very good. So 10.1.14.31. The public port is going to be, we'll call this 1000.
Oh, okay, yeah. The next one, increment up.
And 443. Although this might really screw up because now it's going to scream at me because I'm going to a non-standard port. But that's okay. We're just showing proof of concept. Okay. All right. So what I can do now is I have a second computer here. This computer is actually outside the network. So this is on the WAN port, not on the LAN port. So to that router, this computer looks like it's on the internet.
Okay. Okay.
So what I'm going to do is let me go to my status because I need to know. Oh wait, hold on. Let me save that. Let's save. Thank you. Save the settings. Go my status. I need my internet address. So my quote unquote internet address is 10.135.25.165.
Right.
That's not a real address. That's not routable. If you tried to type that into your browser right now, that would go nowhere unless you're in that subnet in that network. We're actually behind a NAT.
Okay.
But to my computer thinks it's the internet.
Okay.
So I'm going to go to this other computer here. So if I go to that address, which was 10.135.25.165, what do you think is going to happen, Brian?
I don't think it's going to work.
And you would be right, because that address is actually just the router. It's not the port that I set. The port that I set was 999. So what I can do is put a colon here and 999, and now it's going. See, now it's been forwarded over to the network camera.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
There we go. Wait. So you got it right?
Okay. So this laptop that you're on right now is like. So say you're like on the internet. You're somewhere far away right now.
Precisely.
Okay. Okay.
See,
so
and now this is the computer that's on the internet. It's now going through the router, and I'm hitting port 999, which it's sending to port 80 on my network camera.
Network camera, which then you had to put in your password and stuff because that's set up on the camera.
Exact same way, exact same thing. So to this computer, all it knows is it's a web server. It doesn't care that's at port 999 because it thinks it's port 80.
Right. That makes sense. The part that kind of frightens me is what if somebody got my IP address like that?
Well, what do you mean?
And then scanned all the ports and then found...
Yes, and this is why we're going to be doing the third segment. In the third segment, we're going to explain why you should do port forwarding only if you know what you're doing. This camera, I would never put on the internet. This camera has several known vulnerabilities, so this is not something I would port forward to. I would put this inside my network and then VPN to the network, so only I have access to it. But like right now, if this was actually exposed to the internet, within 5 minutes, there'd be an automated scan that goes by it. It would see that it's open on port 999. It would enumerate it, find out that, oh, it's just a web server. It would enumerate it further and find out, oh, it's an Access webcam web server. Well, we've got an exploit for that.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Which would be bad.
I just feel like there's been times where I've tried that, where I've typed in my IP address that I have assigned at my home, and it hasn't worked. But maybe I haven't typed in the right port for it before.
It's possible. If you go back to the other computer, Alex, so what you see now is this is the traffic monitor on the Synology, and as you can see, traffic has increased because I'm now drawing from that internet, the quote-unquote internet computer.
Video, yeah.
Precisely. And see, my upload is 4.75 megabytes per second, so now I know how much that camera was taking up. If I'm doing it full resolution, that's 4.54 megabytes per second.
If you go to the device list too, you can see exactly what IP is taking up the data.
So if you see like my Access, almost no download, but all that is upload.
Oh, okay, that's pretty cool.
But that only happened because of this. If you go back, Alex, this is my port forwarding rules. Remember, I set it up so that if something hits 999 on the public port,
it'll be sent to
port 80
on that IP address
on 10.1.14.31.
Makes sense.
We have to make sure we get this because this is important. Do you understand it?
I get this. Yeah, this makes sense.
Okay, good. Now, if I had another camera that also needed port 80. Let's say I have 3 or 4 of these things.
Yeah.
I can address them all. What I would do is I would say like 999 goes to you, port 80. 1001 goes to you, port 80. 1003 goes to you, port 80. Right? So I can have as many of those as I need because I've got 65,535 ports to play with.
Are there ports that you shouldn't use? Like, I mean, you
Yes.
talked about those other ones, that like FTP and stuff there.
I would stay away from any of the ports that are used by typical services. So again, don't use port 80. Don't use port 21. Don't use port 443, because that can actually cause issues within your network. You don't want to use anything that people know is a service. In fact, most of the time when I set a port, it's always 10,000 and above.
Okay.
I've got so much room. There's no reason for me to crowd the addresses that are going to be used on a regular basis.
That makes sense. And the danger of leaving this to just 80, like if you didn't assign it 999 and then push that to 80, like what if you just left it at 80? Then that means a lot of traffic from the internet would also go to it.
It just means that I don't want to make it easy for the attacker. It's not hard to figure out what it is.
Yeah.
But if I leave port 80 open on my network, people know it's a web server.
Low-hanging fruit.
Super low-hanging fruit. I mean, it doesn't really help if I make it port 10,000, but at least the super automated script kiddie tools won't think it's a web server until it pokes a little further.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm thinking about the Xbox. You don't need to give it those. You don't need to assign like 999 and then go to port, the list of ports that you had. Like it's just you open those ports of that. And
no, you still would.
Would you?
Yeah. So for the Xbox, let me bring up my list here again. You would want to forward public port 88. To private port 88 on that IP address.
Okay.
You would want to forward public port 3074 to the private port 3074 on the internal. So
you wouldn't obfuscate those ports. You wouldn't do 999 send to 88 because that doesn't make sense.
But that's different because that Xbox it's communicating with a server that will only communicate on those ports.
Right.
Whereas me coming from the outside, I just remember, hey, if I want to get back to my network camera number 1, it's port 10,000, and camera number 2 is port 20,000, or so on and so forth.
Okay.
Right? So if I can set the communications, I'll go ahead and obfuscate the ports.
Yeah.
But if there's something on the outside that's communicating, I have to use the ports that it's using.
That makes sense.
Otherwise, it doesn't.
Right. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. Yeah.
It's just.
Okay.
I think we call it. That's no bueno.
No bueno. And I want my Xbox to work.
Maybe it shouldn't work so well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
By the way, for those folks out there who run Minecraft, that port is 25565. That's both TCP and UDP. So if you want to run yourself an internal server, you just use that. And by the way, I think I can obfuscate that. I can have people use user-definable ports in Minecraft. So I could set up multiple servers behind my firewall.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you have the service and then you can assign the outside port to go to the inside port. Okay. Yeah.
All right. So do we get this?
I get this. No, I get this. This makes sense.
Yeah. So what we've done is we've given a path from the internet into my device, forwarded to the proper device on the inside of the network, which now gives devices on the internet visibility into my network, which is good because it means I can hit devices when I want to hit them
remotely.
But it's also bad in that I'm now poking holes in my firewall. Anytime I poke a hole, it means I'm adding a little bit of insecurity. That's not necessarily a bad thing. You just have to understand exactly what you're doing, which is why when we come back, I'm going to show you a tool, a free tool that is super easy to use that can help you to figure out exactly what kind of vulnerabilities you're introducing into your network. You want to take a look at that?
Yes, I do.
We're going to do that in just a bit. But first, these messages.
Here's a look at just a few of the stories we'll be watching in the week ahead. First, the Nintendo Switch has been on short supply, but apparently Wednesday, March 22nd is a magical date. And that GameStop will get an influx of fresh new batches of consoles, meaning you too can get in on the fun. Oh, who are we kidding? They'll sell out before you get there. On Friday, March 24th, Samsung's next big tablet, the Galaxy Tab S3, will hit store shelves and will set you back a cool $600. That gets you a premium 9.7-inch Android tablet complete with an S Pen for when you feel inspired. Finally, if you're like me, life was too busy for you and you missed Star Wars Rogue One in the theater. And who are we kidding? Because that's no damn excuse. But still, have no fear because the digital HD version will hit your screen on the 24th as well. Who knows? Maybe it'll hit the screen of your fancy new Samsung Galaxy Tab S3 that you bought because GameStop was sold out of Nintendo Switches. That's a look at a few of the things we'll be tracking in the coming week. I'm out next week on vacation, but you can join Megan Maroney and Nathan Oliveras Giles on Tech News Today every weekday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern here on Twit.
And we're back. Okay, so there is a tool out there that is going to help you to set up your ports.
Okay. And this will scan my network and then tell me what's wrong with it? Is that
Well,
it?
not necessarily what's wrong, but it will at least let you know exactly what's open and what's not.
Okay, that's good.
Because the worst case scenario is not that you open up a port to a device. The worst case scenario is you have a port open that you don't know is open.
Right, okay.
Right. So this, I mean, at the very least, this should provoke your curiosity. Let's say, hey, why is that open? You know, Google the port, see if that's open by default, and see if there's a way to shut it down if you don't need it.
Okay.
All right. So the program I'm going to use, we've actually used here on Know How before, is called NMAP. It is a free program. You have it for Windows, for Linux, for OS X. So you pick your poison. They've come out with a really cool graphical version. I'm kind of old school. I like command line.
Yeah. Okay.
It's command line's faster and it's smaller. It's it comes inside my toolkit. It's on my USB drive at all times. And I just kind of like the feeling of typing.
Well, you look cooler with the command line
look
too.
like a hacker, man.
Yeah, especially when someone's looking over, like, oh, that guy's hacking over there.
He's hacking so hard.
Especially if it's green text on a black background.
Okay. All right. So we're going back to this computer. Now remember, this computer is outside the network. Okay. So this one is the one that's on the WAN port of my router.
Right.
So what I'm going to do is I know my router address is 10.135.25.165. This particular one is looking at the webcam, but I'm not going to direct to that port. I'm going to go ahead and open up a command shell as an administrator. So I'm going to right-click this, run as administrator. Yes, please, run the program. All right, Alex, you're going to have to get in on this. Get in there. There we go. All right, so I'm going to change directory down to NMAP. Super simple program. In fact, if you type NMAP, what's going to happen is it will just give you all the different commands that you can run.
Oh, okay.
But I'm going to be super, super simple here. All I'm going to do is put NMAP 10.135.25.165. What's going to happen is it's going to run its port scan against the WAN port of my router.
Right.
Okay, so when I do that, it's going to do its little thing. So all it's doing is it's probing those 65,535 possible ports, and it's seeing what services are running, what's listening, and then it should give me a report as to exactly what it heard. It's going to tell me, these are the ports that are open, these are the services that are started, this is what's going on. Now, you can run larger scans. So I can run scans over an entire range. I can ask for an entire subnet. But in this particular case, what it's done is it's come back and said, oh, look, port 999 and port 1000 are open, which is exactly what I want because those are the two ports that I opened, right?
Right, and no other ones that you didn't know about.
Precisely, and so actually, if you go back to my other computer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable those rules. So I've just turned off the port forwarding that I just established. All right, and I'm going to rerun the NMAP scan. If you come back to the other computer, we have to push in there. Here we go. So if this is working, it should report back that there are no ports open, which is what I want. This is one of these basic tests that it seems stupid, but with poorly made routers, sometimes you'll just see mystery ports that are open. And you'll find out that the remote interface is on by default. Or you'll find out that it passes port 10,000 for some reason.
So if you do
there we go. That's exactly what I want. So host is up. All 1,000 scan ports on 10.135.25.165 are filtered. And there we go.
Okay. Well, say that you do find a mystery port. How do you diagnose? I guess you just search that port, like Google it, and figure out what service that might be.
Figure out what service it is. If it doesn't come back, then you go through in my screen here. You would go through your port, whatever router you have, your port forwarding, and see if something's set up there. If something's not set up, Alex, actually, if you come back, go through settings like Internet and find out if it has something like a where is that? Like Smart WAN. Where it's doing some weird binding. Look at remote access to make sure remote access is turned off. And if you absolutely cannot positively shut down a port, it might be time to replace that router.
Because that might mean that it was owned?
It could mean that it's owned because it means that think about what it means. It means your router is quite possibly running a service that you don't know about. That's super bad news.
Okay.
Which, by the way, if you scan most, like the default cable modem router or DSL router modem that you get from your ISP, a lot of them have ports open that you don't trust, which is why I never trust those things.
Okay, so as long as you have that external that like internet address that is to your router, you can scan that.
Precisely.
So if I went over to Alex's house and I got his IP address,
you can scan his IP
and
address.
then scan his stuff.
Now, Alex, if you go back to my computer, I'm not showing you the more gray hat aspects of NMAP, but this is an incredibly powerful tool. This, actually, I do want to fix. So it is enumerating and it's finding MAC address. So it found the MAC address of my router, which it has to. There's no way to fix that.
Oh, really?
That's public. But it was able to enumerate my router and figure out that it's a Synology.
Because of the MAC address?
No, just because it means that my router responded to an OS probe.
Oh, okay, and said, hey, I'm Synology.
Yeah, I'm Synology, yeah.
Is there a way
now,
to...
that's not so bad because people should see Synology and say, okay, there's not really there's no exploits on this.
Right, but someone could scan...
Someone says, Linksys. Like,
right.
Okay, yeah, there's probably a couple of exploits. Netgear, yeah, definitely, there's a couple of exploits.
Yeah.
You can turn that off, but normally not easily.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. So you'd have to like do like a firmware update or something? Or?
You can do a firmware update, and then you just look through your settings to see if there's a way for you to like do not respond to any WAN requests.
Okay. Can you go back to the router settings real quick?
Okay.
And then go to security for me. Boop. Where was it? I thought I saw it before. I thought there was like
probably under firewall.
Well, maybe.
What are you looking for specifically?
There were services before that I wasn't sure if I needed. Oh, those are all disabled. Okay.
Yeah. But see, this is what I like about Synology. These are all disabled by default. A lot of especially the lower end ones, they turn them all on because they don't want to receive any customer service calls.
Maybe it wasn't the Synology I had, but the router I had previously. But it was like filter NAT requests, filter. It was like a few security settings that I didn't know exactly what they did, but it was like filter requests from the internet, and I was just curious if that was part of the port scanning
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah. Anytime that you have the ability to block or not respond to external traffic.
Yeah.
Again, if you don't need it, then turn it off.
Okay.
Right.
Cool.
So
this is fascinating.
Now here's the fun part. And okay, don't do this. Don't do this.
What?
Don't do this. Don't do this on your home network. Go to a Starbucks and do it there. Don't do that. Seriously.
Don't do that either.
This tool is exactly the tool that we used to use on internet on interop. So what we could do is we could sit there and we would scan the entire class A, which is a crap ton of addresses, and it would go address by address, port by port, and look at everything that's opened. And you would see so many misconfigured routers that have like all their ports forwarding to something, or have all their port 80 and port 443 forwarding to a server that's not hardened against the internet. You can do that, but know that a lot of ISPs will now look at random port scans, and if you're doing it, they'll throttle you or shut you down.
Whoa.
Because they know that an attack is probably being launched from your IP address. I only tell you this so that you don't try this at home and suddenly you're not connected to the internet anymore. ISPs got wise to this, and they kind of made an agreement with each other. Like, I don't want my network attacking yours. I don't want your network attacking mine.
I see.
So if you see a single IP address that just starts scanning the internet, do me a favor and shut it down.
And that's why you use a VPN, right? You could, I mean, theoretically, I don't know any of this.
So that's how ports work. And again, that is an incredibly cool security tool. Don't worry about copying down the address now. We're going to make sure that the links are in our show notes.
Yep.
It's free. It's something that's very easy to run, and it's something that the only command that you need to know is NMAP. So type NMAP and your address, and it will tell you whether or not you're secured. You can also use something like Shields Up. We're not showing it here because Shields Up would actually expose our external IP address.
Oh, right.
But if you don't want to run NMAP because you don't want to go outside and hit your own address, you can just go to Steve Gibson's GRC, Shields Up, and it will run a port scan against your network.
Okay.
That's what that
I've
tool
heard
is.
of that. I've heard of Steve talking about that before. Okay, cool.
So are we cool? I mean, again, we're not going super deep because that's going to be for Networking 102. We're going to get freaky with ports in the future because they are possibly the most powerful tool that you're going to have when you start getting to advanced networking. But does this make sense? Does it make sense that at least I understand the basics of opening up a device to the internet, and at least I know the basics of securing my network?
Yes. No, all of this has made sense. It's kind of like a routing onion is now that I'm imagining it.
It's got layers.
because we've covered the IP addresses that are individually assigned for the devices on your network, and then like the sub layer or the layer next to that is ports and like individually sending data over those things and assigning those. So yeah, it's making sense now.
Good.
Like before, ports were a little bit of a mystery, but I like this.
Nice, good. Now, if you want to know anything about what we've done, I've actually written some pretty, I think, understandable notes. I actually asked my father to read them and see if they made sense. He said, "Yeah,
and
I get
if he understands it."
Yeah, well, he was smart. He's smart.
I know, no.
He doesn't really do networking, but yeah, you can find everything at our show notes. Brian, where do we put those things?
You can find those at twit.tv/KH, and like Padre said, all the links to the stuff we talked about. And actually, Padre, I have to give you credit. These show notes that you've been doing have been really in depth and detailed. They have to.
Because when we're doing networking stuff, they have to actually know the commands, because otherwise they'll just shake their hands in frustration and then curse you.
Right.
Not
and
me.
Well, yeah, and then you just get angry emails all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Oh, by the way, I'm going to mention this several times. I know we mentioned it last Thursday, but a funny thing happened. Dropbox actually killed public folders. And we were using Dropbox to host a lot of our files. So all the code for our projects.
I was wondering what happened.
All of our 3D files, we got to figure. Now we have to go back through the entire inventory and reassign addresses.
Fudge.
I know.
But I didn't say fudge.
You did not say fudge.
Did they warn people that they were doing this?
They warned me 48 hours before it happened.
I guess that
I'm like,
counts.
that's not enough time.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
I get why they did it, but it was kind of a
kind
cool
of a
move.
Jerk move.
A little jerk move.
Especially for all those past show notes.
Yeah. So I understand if you're looking at old projects, it's frustrating right now. We're working to fix that. It's not so easy to have to go back to 100 plus episodes.
Yeah.
Actually, almost 200 episodes.
We'll figure something out.
Yeah. Wow. What we may have to do is for all the old episodes, we're going to have to I'll just make a new site that I can keep up, and I just won't trust Dropbox anymore.
Yeah, that's the problem with trusting the cloud, right? Like all our stuff in the cloud, who knows if it's gonna be there all the time. This little blobby thing behind you, that's the cloud.
That's the fault. Also, don't forget that you can find us in the social, specifically on our Google Plus group. It's a great place to find ideas for projects, to ask questions, to give answers. You're going to find that by going to Google Plus and looking for know-how. There's a very short approval process. I try to get it done within a couple of hours. It's just to keep out all the automated spam accounts. But once you're in, you get access to almost 11,000 Kitas. That's our know-it-alls. These people are on every stage of their maker DIY journey, and they've probably got something that you can play with. And also, it's a great place for you to give us questions and pictures or videos of your projects, so we can use them here on Know-How.
Definitely. But if you want to connect with us more directly or see what we're doing when we're not on Know-How, like posting pictures of corgis. What did you posted something recently?
I've posted a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I know. Usually you see us posting around 1 o'clock at night when we're about to fall asleep. But you can follow that on Twitter. I'm at cranky_hippo.
And you're going to find me at PadreSJ. And you're going to find the third member of our crew.
Who?
I want to say Steve. He looks like a Steve. I'm pretty sure it's Steve. You can find Steve, twitter.com/ANELF3. That's ANELF3. Steve's he's a longtime member of the Twit crew. He has been our producer for a very long time. And
he lives in the abyss.
Excuse me, Padre, that's director.
Director.
Oh, I'm sorry. See, I'm sometimes mistaken.
He doesn't care if you mispronounce his name. He cares if you mispronounce his title.
Director Steve. Yes. So find Director Steve at ANELF3. Until next time, I am Father Robert Balacer.
And I'm Brian Burnett.
And now that you know how,
go port forward it, or route it, or static IP it. There's a lot of stuff we've covered.